Okay, we're looking at Chiron, and Chiron went direct. It's in the sign of Aries currently, and it was retrograde for 5 months, around 5 months. So I'm going to guide you a little bit. If you don't have your birth chart, then you can go to astro.com here and you just type into the internet astro.com. And then if it brings up this page, and then you'll be able to put your details in and also have an account if you wish where you can put on loads of charts, like up to 1,000 charts. It's not that expensive over the year. And then if you have your time, date, place of birth, time is really important because of the rising sign. So this is, you can see, look, I have an account with them and it's got for me. This is specifically for me. I'll get my pointer. And we have, let's see here. Okay, so when we bring this up, you have to figure out exactly how to see your chart and add things. But this is my birth chart, and on the inside of the wheel, I have all of my planets. And you can see, because I have the birth time, I know where the planets fall. And you can see my moon, my sun, then my Mercury, my Mars, or Venus. And so you can see, and they're in houses and degrees, and then we've got the aspects that go on in our chart as well. And then what we have is that we have this little box here, which tells us our ascendant, our midheaven, so that we know that's midheaven, that's my ascendant. Then we have my birth planets in blue here. And then here we have the current transit. So right now, the moon is just going to be moving into Aquarius probably in the next couple of hours. By tomorrow, it will be in Aquarius, which is quite interesting because to have an Aquarius Christmas moon, I don't know when that's happened before, but one would have to look to see when we had a moon, what the moon was on Christmas Day, because it will change each year. We're looking at Chiron. So Chiron here is on my IC. You can see the bottom of the chart, and where it is in our chart shows us what we are trying to heal. It shows us where we are sensitive, and it shows our sensitivity. Now, what we're going to do is where is the Chiron in transit? So we know, if you know astrology, that Chiron is in the sign of Aries. So you can see my sign of Pisces is here. My ascendant is Scorpio, 27 degrees. My first house is in part Scorpio. And actually, it's a mix there. I've got intercepted by Scorpio, Sagittarius, and then Capricorn in my first house. My second house is Capricorn. And you can see here, because of the way the ecliptic and the mathematics of this is how my chart falls. However, Aries is where Chiron is right now. And you can see, for me, it's going to be going into my fifth house. It's going to be retrograde. It's going to go forward. And it's going to touch in on my Venus, which is actually quite beautiful, because what it's going to allow is a lot of healing for me in my creativity. So it's a bit different. The placement is a bit different to the transit, because when we're born, my Chiron was here. It takes 49 to 51 years to move around the chart. So in 2017, I had my Chiron return. Now, if I live, nearly up to 100, that would be interesting. If I do, then I will have my second Chiron return. But most people have only one Chiron return. So I'm going to show you what happened over here. I'm going to change and share Solar Fire. New share, and we've got Solar Fire here. So this is now the collective chart, okay? 24th of December. I'm going to get my spotlight. 24th of December, 2022. It's 23:15 right now, but the chart, I pulled it up at 23:04 p.m. United Kingdom time. So right now, as I read this, if you're in the USA, depending on where you are, it's going to be different times. And if you're ahead in Australia, then that's going to be, if you're in New York, that's 5 hours behind. And if you're in California, then it's 8 hours. So it varies. Now, when we look at Chiron, we can see that it's here. And if I go back by hours, I just want you to watch when that went direct. So I'm going to go back by hours. 12. There you go. You see the S appeared. That's because it was in station. And we will see the R appear. See the red now, station? And they're nearly there. So there you go. So it was retrograde up until the 22nd of December, 2022. And what's happened is that it's gone direct in the last 48 hours. So watch. I'm going to go forward now. This is the 22nd of December at 9 a.m. in the morning in the UK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Keep going. Because the S, you see station, coming out of station. S probably means that it is in station, and then S, the red S for sugar, and then the S that you can see that it's black. In writing, you can see that, so the hour, 1, 2, 3. So on the 24th of December, wow, okay, at 10:04 a.m., roughly, let's say 10 a.m., it went direct. And when it's retrograde, we're really going inward we're meant to relax, rewind, and release. So that's the whole point of a retrograde. We're releasing something, we're going inward and releasing. I've got a lovely book, and I've got a few on Chiron, but there's one I got called Chiron and the Healing Journey by Melanie Reinhardt. And I will put this link of the book that I'm going to read a little bit from, and I'm going to put it under the link under the YouTube that I'm uploading. If you don't see this on YouTube and I upload it somewhere else, then I'll go to the YouTube link, and look underneath, and you'll see what the title of this book, because it's worth having a copy, because we're all going to have a Chiron return around age 49 to 50. And we want to be able to understand what this means in our chart, because it really is important. It's the wound that we've either come in with, or we have introjects, stuff that we've taken on board from our culture, from our parental carers, society, and we are wounded. And as it moves through different signs, we're wounded in different areas. So for me, it's in my 4th house, which means that I was wounded. And then the other thing, we're looking at what it touches upon. So let me do something before I go here, because I want to show you what I mean by that. So new share, and we're going to go back to this. So if you look at my Chiron, we're not talking about the transit now, we're talking about the natal. It's conjunct my IC, it's 4 to 4.5 degrees off there. And then it's also conjunct Saturn. So I had a very difficult childhood with this. I'm not saying that I've had a more difficult childhood than anyone else, but it was extremely tough for me. This Chiron actually does some pleasant things in trines. There's some hardship with the oppositions, and then also squares. So you see it squares my moon. Does it square my moon, actually? Saturn, no, that's Chiron. So you can see there's touching in there. So, and then the moon is then attached to other things. So when we have a conjunction, it becomes very strong in our chart. Conjunctions are very powerful. So look, I've got one here. I've got conjunction. All of this is conjunct up here as well. And then I've got conjunction up here. Whoops. And then I've got conjunct planets here. So if you're looking at your chart, you want to look at what's conjunct. I've got Neptune conjunct my South Node. I've got the moon, 0 degrees, conjunct my DC, and then they're within reach because that's 5 degrees from my sun, that's 6 degrees from my front sun, and that's 7 degrees. So all of these are all pulled in together. And whatever house they fall in will show us the area of life that's been affected. So for me, this is about partnership and others, just because it's 0 degrees here. And then just up here. And then I've got the North Node. So the 6th house is to do with health, it's to do with health of the body, it's to do with our routines, it's to do with also being of service, not like a martyr, but this is one has to be careful. So, and then I've got the opposition here to all of these planets as well, the South Node opposing all of this. And then I've also got the Neptune opposing this as well. So when we begin to look at a chart, we can see what's going on. And then I've got my Lilith down here, which is very interesting because if that Lilith does square, they're like a T square there. I've had a lot of stuff going there. This is Persephone. I believe you pronounce it that way. Again, that's a trine to my moon. So there's some great strength there, but there's a lot of tension in my chart. We all have this. It's neither good nor bad because nothing's written in stone, but it just shows as I came in and I was born, this is what my chart looked like. And there's very good stuff as well. I've got trines going on here. I've got the yod. You can see quintiles, not semi-quintiles, quintiles and biquintiles. So all of these things mean something in the middle. I mean, it took me years to understand and learn my own chart. But this here is very tough. But when I had my Chiron return, I went through huge losses and a bit of a breakdown. Literally, I went through a lot of hardship because I had to heal. It's not that healing is a funny thing because a lot of people talk about it, but really what we're doing is we're integrating the woundings so that we're not in a reactive mode all the time to what wounded us. It's like if you wound yourself and then you keep knocking that wound, if like you get a paper cut on your finger, and then every time you touch something, like sorry to say this, but you slice a bit of lemon and you get some lemon juice on the little paper cut or whatever, it can really, really hurt. Yeah, you don't even see the paper cut, but it can really be painful. So Chiron's a bit abrasive, that it can be that we have a lot of hardship. So this then means that we go through, and as it comes to our Chiron return, we're trying to deal with what hurt us. So it becomes the gift for us. Now, if I go back to stop share, new share. So, okay, so now we have the collective chart right now. So see this, it went direct. So let's look at what Chiron in Aries means, or the first house. So it's existence, the fact we exist, and we're all of value. It's just the way it is. There's nothing to prove as such. And the first house and Aries concern the basic feeling that I exist. It's Mars. Yeah, it's related to Mars, if you think about that. It's a desire to emerge into life with conquest. It's self-assertion and initiative. Now, do remember, I'm reading this from Chiron and the Healing Journey by Melanie Reinhardt. With Chiron here, I am, people say I am, or inner sense of aliveness, primary identity and existence is fierce and strong, and yet we may also feel somehow wounded. Now, when we're babies, which is really interesting, we have that roar in us, a lot of babies do, they'll cry, they'll grab things, they'll let us know what they want, and they don't question their value at all. When we're babies, we don't question our value. We have a desire, Mars need to survive, so we want food. It's in our unconscious, subconscious, unconscious survival. Mars is that fire type life energy. And yet we aim, now I'm going to continue reading. So as if we do not quite, so it's saying Chiron, with Chiron here, I am, or in a sense of aliveness, primary identity and existence is fierce and strong, and yet we may also feel somehow wounded as if we do not quite have the right to be here. So Chiron, let's look when that moved into Aries. We're going to go back years. So right now it's 11 degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So if we go months, 1, 2, there you go. It moved into Aries, 28 degrees, days. We're going to get that day. There you go. 2. So in February 2019, it moved into the sign of Aries. So, and it's going to be there. Let's do years ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 days. I love solar fire that we can see what's going on. So 4, 3, 2, 1. And on its stations, brilliant. So until 2027, yeah? And then it's going to station, it's going to go retrograde, it'll go back into 2028. Oh my gosh. Okay, 2027. Then it will go, if we go forward, it stations, and then it will move back into Aries. And then it will go direct again. But we just know for now that it's in there until 2027 and a bit beyond, because it goes retrograde for 5 months and then it goes direct again. So let's take into account that we feel wounded if we do not, like, it's like we do not have the right to be here. I don't know how many people feel like that. Like they do, it's almost like we feel like we don't have the right to be here. We don't feel we have the right to use the Earth's resources. I have been watching, what goes on in the world with all of this. It made me think, like, looking after our resources, electricity, gas, all of our resources. And then I thought to myself, I wonder if very, like the elites, for instance, are they turning off their lights and, having to hold back on the use of electricity, gas, etc.? And I thought probably not. So if we don't feel worthy and then we haven't got the resources that, to pay extra, etc., then we can feel, we haven't got the right to be here. We haven't got the right to enjoy the earth, the resources, the travel, the this, the that. So it's almost a feeling inadequate, I would say. I'm thinking about this as I read this. So once we learn that the vulnerability we fear is actually an asset rather than a liability. So we have to learn, whilst Chiron is in Aries, that vulnerability that we fear is actually an asset. So when we are vulnerable, and we can look at it as if it's a defect, but the truth is, to a degree, everybody and everything is vulnerable to something. And there is nothing wrong with being vulnerable. So many of us, we don't show our true selves, first house, emotion, yeah, because we feel that we can see this play out on social media. People are using filters. I've been slightly guilty of that. In a reel I played with. We don't have to feel guilty about it. The reel is there and the filter is there. But the point is that in order to show ourselves, we can feel inadequate just being who we are, that we think we have to do something to get attention from others or to be loved. So once we learn that vulnerability we fear is actually an asset rather than a liability, the sense of having to struggle to assert our existence can relax. So this is really important. Once we know that vulnerability we fear is actually an asset. So if we can just from now on realize that when we feel vulnerable, it is an asset. You can say that to yourself. I can say it to myself right now. My vulnerability is an asset. That's really empowering. And it's really important that we take that on board. When you think about it, like if we look around us in the public eye, people don't show their vulnerability, and people who don't show their vulnerability, politics, etc., they can look really great and whatever, but the reality is that they are also vulnerable, but they're not showing their vulnerability because it's fear. To not show your vulnerability is because you're fearful that if you do, people are going to judge. This book goes on to say the pervasive fear of experiencing non-being, which sometimes accompanies this Chiron placement, can be understood as a doorway to a deeper sense of being and existence. In order to avoid the sense of inadequacy we feel when it comes to willpower and choice, we may tend to take our cue from others, perhaps also resenting them at the same time. Now, we can see that's gone on the last few years. We've been taking our cue from powers that be and governments that, example, how would how would we feel if I said, well, I don't own my body? I also think about this when it comes to ownership, where I see people thinking that they have ownership over their children, or people are in relationships and they think they have ownership over their partners, etc. It's almost like the vulnerability that people have and the fear locks people into a way of behaving that's really less than loving. It's not great. Continuing, we may unconsciously feel we only exist as a mirror to someone else, taking comfort in this, but inwardly criticizing ourselves for it. So this will be the inner critic. We critique ourselves when we know we're not stepping up to the plate, or we know that we're, not being our true selves. We don't like it generally. It doesn't feel good to not be who we really are. And clearly we change from environment to environment. Like if you go to a doctor's surgery, or if you go to a concert, you're going to be the environment. We're going to behave differently in different environments. That's what I'm trying to say. So, but inwardly criticizing ourselves for it, we may feel motivated to champion a cause on someone else's behalf, like a knight in shining armor, but also feel we have no will of our own. Now, we have to realize at this time, because I see a lot of people, I'll address this, Catherine Austin Fitts. I'd like you to Google and watch Financial Rebellion if you can, about the money that's going on in this world. She's excellent. Financial Rebellion. And as an example, because of what's been going on in the world globally with monetary stuff, I understand the importance of cash. So clearly we receive our money in whatever format we get it. We receive it through, a direct payment and whatever. And then we have the money where we have it in our bank, and then we go to the bank and we go and draw out our money, and then we go and spend it. So I've been drawing out cash. I mean, I know we can't do this online, but then I've said to people, I've explained to them about Catherine Austin Fitts and the Financial Rebellion and why we need to use cash. And people will say to me, they'll say, oh, but I'm only one person and it doesn't really matter, and it's easier to use the card, as an example. And it's almost like saying, well, what I do doesn't make a difference. I don't count. Every single one of us counts in every single thing we do. Every movement we do, even behind closed doors, whatever we're doing is of value and of importance. Like right now, I'm on my own and I'm sitting here making a video, and it's Christmas Eve. And even if 2 people hear this whole video, it might spark somebody in something that makes a difference. So even if one person watches it. So the point would be that also, as I'm doing this video, I'm learning something. So everything we do is of value to some degree. Whether we do something or we don't do something, there's still value in it. And because we're moving through life and we're all of value. So in this book, she is saying now, in order to avoid the sense of inadequacy we feel when it comes to willpower and choice, we tend to take our cue from others. We want to realize that taking our cue from others is not always a good idea. as we've seen over the last couple of years. We may unconsciously feel we only exist as a mirror to someone else, taking comfort in, but inwardly criticizing ourselves for it. We may feel motivated to champion a cause on someone else's behalf, like a knight in shining armor. I know I've read this bit, but it's important. But also feel we have no will of our own. Displays of bravado and fighting spirit compensate for the pain, self-doubt, and fear underneath, which could result in repeating a cycle of futile and self-destructive endeavors. We tend to translate emotional tension immediately into premature action. So when we, all of the bravado, and then we're taking action in a premature fashion, like we're running to 2 years of, worrying about that this is not my body, as an example, and I've got no say over my body, and I just want to get on with life, so I'm just going to go along with what I'm being told to do, as an example. I think we all get the drift, maybe, of what I'm talking about here. So with this Chiron placement, we may demonstrate an almost militant self-sufficiency. So we do need others, yeah? And if we don't ask for support, she's saying being unable to ask for support and convinced that we must go it alone. And a lot of people have been put in a position with this Chiron in Aries of where through the period of lockdowns and whatever, we were feeling like we were on our own because people were falling out all over the place because of having to make different decisions and had different opinions about something, which looking back, I think it's getting very clear now what was taking place. Underneath, however, there may be a deep fear of doing anything that truly expresses what we want. So one person with Chiron in the first house where there ought to be a sense of me, there is an enormous hole of pain that feels beyond my ability to endure it. So there can be a lot of pain. The point is there can be so much pain with that Chiron in the first house. And if that Chiron then is in your first house, wherever it is in Aries, it's going to be hitting other planets, even in transit. So if we go back to my chart, new share, and if I go back to my chart, so that Chiron, let's see, is touching in on my other planets. So as it moves up here, like this is all I'd need to do to really get this. So if you take this Chiron and you put it on my Venus here, then that is going to be trine to my part of fortune. And then it's going to be square to Lucifer. That sounds scary, but that's the bringer of light. It's quite deep. I won't go into that now. And then it's also going to be, Chiron will be sextile then to my moon. And then it will be doing an inconjunct to a few planets up here as well. Not an inconjunct. An inconjunct it's sort of part of the yod that I've got going on there. So for me, moving through the fifth house, I think it's going to be quite a beautiful experience for me because I'm really learning to accept myself. And I think this is what we're trying to do with this Chiron in Aries. And what will happen is, because Chiron moves around the chart, new share, because Chiron moves around the chart at a space 49 to 51 years, 360 degrees, other planets are going to hit that Chiron. So Jupiter, if we're going back to 24th of December 2022, which is here. So Jupiter is going to move on to Chiron, and that will conjunct. Yeah, when it gets to. So if we see when that happens, and when it will move into orb as well, because it'll have 5, let's say just 5 degrees. Some would give it more. Some would say that it's in orb already, like it's 10 degrees away. If we go weeks ahead, we're watching Jupiter move on to Chiron. 1, 2, 3. So Jupiter, Chiron, we want that at 12. And you see here, 14. Okay. This is March. So Jupiter on Chiron will be interesting for all of us. And then there's up here we'll have Saturn will be in Pisces. This is March 2023, the 11th of March. We will have, the node has moved off Uranus. If I take here and we see Jupiter, we're going to go here. So Chiron in Aries is our sense of being has been violated, for sure, yeah? Our sense of being has been violated. How interesting. In some way. And you may fear asserting yourself. Well, how about that, hey? It's been there since 2019 and it moves out in 2027, 2028. So our fear, our sense of being has been violated in some way. And we may have fear of asserting ourselves. And we may also overcompensate by attempting to be the first at everything. Interesting. Physically, we may suffer head wounds. I mean, you know, I think we've had our heads done in over the last couple of years, so to speak. Also, mental health is off the scale at the moment because, you know, people were in fear. It was this actually what was going on with this whole lockdown thing. It was mentally very disturbing for people because we all thought we were going to die. And then we were offered a product to help us, apparently, which now didn't seem to do what it was supposed to do exactly. But this is my view. People will have different views. Then, so when it says that Chiron in Aries, you may suffer headwinds because it's Mars related, yeah? And then we had injections, which was a needle, which is Mars related. And then it's also, though, where we may become pioneers in a way which will be of service to humanity. So I've seen a lot of people, including myself, a lot of people have stepped up and spoken up and been of service to humanity through this time. So this is not over yet. I don't mean what's gone on, but the, you know, this Chiron in Aries. So it's really worth looking at where this is in your chart. I'm going to see in this book, I know that I didn't mark it off, but this book does have aspects as well. Chiron in aspect to Jupiter. So let's consider that that's going to happen in March 2023. Again, from this book, people with Chiron Jupiter contacts may have somewhat messianic tendencies. I don't know if that's right. Messiah, I think she's trying to say, Messiah tendencies. The nature of their message being indicated by the signs in the houses involved. So for me, that's going to be in my 5th house. So the Chiron Jupiter conjunct. And on my Venus, wow, that will happen as well. No, let's see. Not quite, no, 14 degrees, but it's in orb when it does happen. So they may be great seekers after an ever elusive enlightenment. Jupiter rides Chiron like a hobby horse off on his mission, keen to enlist as many fellow travelers as possible. However, because it's expansion, yeah, when we think about Jupiter. So, however, we could have big hopes for grandiose aspirations, but avoid human life in the areas covered up by this aspect. Chiron Jupiter aspects, we are unlikely single-handedly to stop the arms race or end world famine. We may instead be called upon to recognize the inner pain we have invested in these causes. For example, if we have abused and ignored our own animal natures, we could become more voracious, campaigners. If we are afraid of our own suppressed aggression, we might protest about the violence on the streets. This is not to suggest that there is no value in directing our sense of injustice to a collective cause we feel for. However, Chiron Jupiter contacts may harbor a dream or be on a trip which has escalated out of all proportions. The vision has turned sour, becoming a wounding influence. The loss of a cherished vision or mission is often part of the life journey of those with Chiron Jupiter. If our capacity to symbolize and internalize meaning is wounded, we may risk enacting inner issues in concrete ways, which at best levels leaves us feeling empty and at worst may cause emotional or financial disaster. Wow. Well, financially, globally, wherever we're heading. And there's a lot of talk about the CBDC and cash not being at much value because of inflation and such. So this is going to be an interesting time ahead of us. And so many people are working on themselves, I'm aware of. So let me know where your Chiron is if you want to. My Chiron is in Pisces at 25 degrees. Let me know where yours is and if you know if you've got any hard aspects to it or great aspects. Thanks for watching and Merry Christmas. Catch you later.